It's time for a little comedy, a little content, and a lot of conversation. It's the Geno Jones Show, exclusively right here on YouTube. And now here's your host, Geno Jones.
Hey, it's showtime. What's happening, everybody? The Geno Jones Show. So listen, I come to you live. My normal days, start time, Monday through Friday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. in Chicago, 3:30 p.m. out in L.A. on the West Coast. Please subscribe, share, screen grab, especially this show. Really all of them, but especially today. Like and binge watch all my back episodes. Next week, of course, 4th of July holiday really begins this weekend. No live show on Monday, the 3rd, or July 4th on Tuesday. There'll be one live show next week, July 5th, and then I will be taking a break. However, I won't be here live, but I'll be here. The Geno Jones channel is up and running 24/7, so you can check out any episode of the Geno Jones Show, watch all my great back episodes, binge watch my conversations with Ronald and Ernie Isley. That's right, Mr. Big was on the show back, I believe, in November. And my man Howard Hewitt and Lettucey and Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis and Lenny Williams and Roy Chip Anthony and just so many great guests, some talented new artists. Sister I had on last week, Cruz the Dame. My man Josh X just got the Afro beat with the Caribbean vibe. It's a really hot single. You can check out that show from about 2 weeks ago. So binge watch all my back episodes. And I'll be popping in just to remind you. So from July 6th, the next live show is going to be on July 18th. But we'll talk about that later. All right, today I got a special show, just in case you hadn't heard. The Supreme Court ended affirmative action in college admissions. So let me start off this way, and I'm going to bring in my guest. You've seen the brother. He's got a nonprofit. He's a social justice warrior. He's got a background in education, a political strategist, a brilliant brother, my man A.J. Davis. There's only a few people that I thought of and said they got the intellect, the brilliance, and they got the passion and the fire. They got the complete package to talk about what's going on. So my grandmother, you hear me talk about my grandparents because my grandparents raised me along with me, really raised me and my mom and my two sisters, in essence. Jean Jones, who I'm named after, she would say, Jeannie, don't ever beg anybody to take your money. Don't ever beg anybody to take your money. And if somebody don't want you around, then you leave. Never stay or be anywhere where you are not wanted. So really the Supreme Court did the dirt that America has done a long time ago, because remember, we out of the Civil War, we had, after Reconstruction, they created a whole set of laws, Jim Crow laws, because they just couldn't handle our ancestors, black people, being free, successful business owners and entrepreneurs and famous entertainers and athletes and owning movie theaters and restaurants, all of that, and politicians. It's like, whoa, I used to own you and now you are my senator. So, and I talked about that so many times. So this Supreme Court decision, Stevie Wonder he probably saw this one coming. I think I talked about it on the show. So affirmative action, private and public universities no longer can use race when it comes to college admissions. Now I want to ask, so do we end what they call legacy admission? What's a legacy admission? Well, your granddaddy and your great-granddaddy, your grandmama went to Harvard College or Princeton or wherever, Yale or the University of Michigan or Stanford or the University of Chicago. So you get in because You are part of a legacy. That's preferential treatment. That's affirmative action. Or maybe your great-grandfather, or maybe your aunt donated $500,000 or $1 million and paid for this beautiful new arena or this beautiful new theater or this wonderful library on campus with their name on it. You ain't got to worry about a standardized test. You're good. That's preferential treatment. That's a form of affirmative action. So are we going to end legacy admissions? Are we going to, end the admissions based on the privilege, the fact that you come from a wealthy family and they donated, they contributed to what they call the endowment, which is really like the bank account, like a savings account these universities have. Endowment, that's really a fancy name for a lot of money that they have, these universities have. Tens of billions. I think Harvard's endowment is got to be somewhere. Last number I heard was like 40, I think it was way more than 40 million. It's probably in the billions. I digress, because that's really not important. So the Supreme Court ending affirmative action in college admissions. Now, okay, you got to see the whole picture here. Got to understand, I'm telling you one thing, but I'm doing something else. So the Supreme Court ending affirmative action, saying that you can't use race as a factor in college admissions. Oh, that's just kind of opening the door. It's like the one person kicked the door open, they don't go in, but the door is open. Oh, ain't nobody around. Come on, y'all, we gonna go in the house. We gonna take everything up out of this house. Oh man, they got furniture and jewelry and flat screen TVs. Oh man, they got a safe with some money in it. Oh, look what we found. Oh, we got a nice car. It's just the beginning. This decision is just gonna kick the door open. So what's coming next? So now you got corporations. I guarantee you, these corporations, I'm sure there's going to be some board meetings. There's probably some CEOs that's on the phone now with the HR departments, and folks are saying, now we can probably use this Supreme Court decision if they say that race can't be a factor in college admissions, then maybe we can get rid of all this diversity and equity and inclusion, because it's racist to want black people and people of color to be equal, and women. Now, who cares about that? They could do what Ron DeSantis, Governor Too Short in Florida, is doing now. Get rid of all this. Let's make America great again. Translation, let's make America for wealthy white men again. White women, that's how you lost. We lost the right, women's reproductive freedom. The Roe versus Wade decision. Oh, here's a little secret. Do you know who affirmative action, and there's data behind this, benefits the most? Who it turned out benefiting the most? It wasn't black people. It wasn't even brown people. It was white women. Because white women were considered a minority. So this is just the beginning. So they've come for college admissions. So, we don't have to let these Negroes in. So let me say this real quick, and I want to bring on my guest. So my call to action, especially for my community as a black man in America. Yes, I am an American, but I will always be black, and I will stay black, and America will see me as a man, but as a black man, and I own it and I wear it. I will always be a black man. I can pull Clarence Thomas or Tim Scott or Candace Owens, or she's a woman, and try to act, well, I'm an American. I'm not black. Oh, your ass is black. And as soon as you try to think that you running some, you know what? They'll remind your black ass that you're black. So my call is, when we had Jim Crow laws and our ancestors were being lynched and raped and murdered, and we had to drink from separate water fountains, and they were burning down cities, neighborhoods that we built like Tulsa, Oklahoma, and then we rebuilt them. We still created greatness. I can make an argument, the greatest justice, Supreme Court justice that we had, one of the greatest legal minds ever, the first African American on the Supreme Court. For real, for real. Thurgood Marshall. He didn't go to Harvard. He didn't go to Yale. He didn't go to Princeton. He didn't go to Stanford. He didn't go to the University of Chicago. He didn't go to the University of Michigan. He didn't go to Duke. You know where he went? To Howard, to a HBCU. So my call is, let's send our best and brightest young men and young women where they are wanted, where they are loved, where they will be loved, they will be truly treated like family, they will be nurtured, and they will get guidance, and they will get the discipline. Somebody, like a family member, say, hey, all right, you messing up. Stay focused. All right, you know, this college life is cool, but you didn't come here to party all the time. You came here because you had a purpose. You get that at HBCUs. And I didn't even attend one growing up in Chicago because of what I wanted to do, which is what I'm doing now in media, on camera, TV, radio host, entertainer, comedian. I was able to get that from a private college in Chicago, Illinois. That was way ahead of this diversity curve way back in the 80s. So let's send our best and our brightest back to HBCUs. And if you decided, or if your child decides, because at the end of the day, it's got to be their decision, it's their life, but we need to encourage them. You don't have to go to Harvard to be great. The greatness is inside of you. Johnny Cochran didn't go to Harvard. I can't think of where he went, but I know he didn't go to Harvard. One of the great legal minds. So Harvard is not going to make you great. And if you got it, and I'm not knocking anyone, any black person that went to Harvard or Yale or Princeton, or if you have a son or daughter or a nephew or niece or grandchild, that's great. But just, we got to change our mindset. Harvard ain't going to make you great. The greatness is inside of you. Harvard or Yale or Princeton would be blessed to have you. But now the Supreme Court is just telling you that, well, they really don't want you. The truth is, even if some of the people in admissions or maybe the president, but the alumni, they don't want you in their universities because they feel any black person that goes to any Ivy League school, you had to get in on affirmative action. There's no way that you, a little Negro, a silly Negro, could be smarter than my white child. Oh, there's no way that can happen. You even got some white liberals that'll come out of a bag on you. Well, now, wait a minute now. You're going to take a spot from my baby. Little Susie, little Johnny. There's no way that Raheem could be smarter than my child. Psych, they are. All right. I got to bring on my guest because I want to make sure he's got plenty of time because he's got a lot to say. You heard me talk about him in the introduction. He's got a nonprofit. He is really rooted in the education community. The brother's got so much wisdom. Political strategist. Got so many titles. The brother wears so many hats. Social justice warrior. A brilliant mind. And a fighter for freedom and justice for everybody. Or as Nelly would say, everybody. Even you white racists. Because we're not anti-anybody. We want everybody to be equal. I don't want anything that you have. I want you to leave me alone and not obstruct me and create laws and create policy that will try to inhibit my greatness. Because my greatness is going to shine. I don't care how light your light is. Your light ain't never gonna outshine my light. We've been great when we were in chains, when our ancestors were enslaved. Let me bring on my man AJ Davis. Let me shut the hell up. AJ, thank you for being patient, brother, and thank you for coming on at the last minute. I am on one, so I'm gonna shut up because I know you got a lot to say. I'm just gonna open up the floor and just get your perspective on this. We had an earlier conversation, full disclosure, and we and I were talking about it. This ruling today, this is just the beginning. This is just they just opening the door, just to come on in the house and just burn down the whole house. I'll let you have the floor.
Yeah, well, as always, thank you, Gino. It's always an honor to be on the show. And yeah, listening to your monologue, you're 100% correct. And I want your viewers and listeners to also acknowledge the fact that it was a little over a year ago, last year, that the uh, Roe v. Wade decision, the monumental abortion rights, women's reproductive rights decision came down. And then people said, I mean, there were indicators that said they're coming after affirmative action. There were uh, case law notes that were being floated around. And so for many of us, we knew it was just going to be a matter of time and when it was going to reach the docket. Um, of course, now everybody is talking about the decision, and of course, it took race-based admissions uh, policies out of the hands of colleges. Now, I do want to point out one thing that maybe is not known as much in this decision, and that is that there is an exception for military academies. The
I,
Supreme Court explicitly stated that military academies are exempt from this ruling. And what was interesting is the Solicitor General Elizabeth Preligar stressed that unique interests of the military and that the unique interests of the military and argued that race-based admissions programs further the nation's compelling interests of diversity. Now, I want people to think about that. So, institutions of higher learning, academic institutions of higher learning, which promote the well-being, the intellectual well-being of students who attend, they can't have a compelling interest of diversity using race-based admissions. But the military academies, which we know support the creation of the military corps of officers in our military branches, which, by the way, have seen plummeting numbers over the last several years, especially as it relates to minority recruitment. So I think that's something people need to take into consideration. But I also want to talk about
well,
something, Gino,
before
that,
you go any further, let me ask you. I want to get your take. So, why do you think the Supreme Court ruled that way?
oh, because in essence, they recognize that the military still is made up of a considerable amount of minority enlisted
Yes.
members. And
Yes.
so to have, the military be devoid of officers, which many of the officers that eventually become officers in the military come out of these academies. So, and these academies don't have strong records of diversity anyway.
Right.
So that
That
you
part too.
had to at least give the appearance of that. But I also want to say something that may run counter to what a lot of the folks um, are thinking. So I definitely agree that the Black community and the Latino community, because this impacts Black and Brown students in particular in a very meaningful way. But one of the things that I think people also need to understand that it's not just going to be a matter of, oh, well, we'll just go to HBCUs. Understand that I believe it's over 80% of the current HBCUs in the United States are state funded. They depend on state funding, they depend on federal funding. And so, one of the things that I challenge people to know is that just sending your children to HBCUs just this past academic year alone, the number of HBCUs that struggled with things such as housing and other infrastructure
Yes.
was significant. So I caution people to think that just jumping ship and pushing our kids into HBCUs is the answer if the infrastructure to support them is not there. The reality of it is what we as a community, and in this case, I'm talking about the Black community, have to understand. We're going to have to get up off the bench. We're going to have to get up off of the sidelines politically. Everyone likes to talk about, well, why should we vote? Nothing matters. The Supreme Court's recent decision is showing you why this matters because the former President Trump celebrated this decision. The Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, celebrated this decision. Um, Ted Cruz, senator from Texas, celebrated this
The former
decision.
vice
And
president
so,
for your boy Orange Schiller, Mike Pence, who's running for
right.
president, he celebrated it.
And so I want people to understand that this is what I call a canary in the coal mine case. And so what that means is that it's not just about higher education. When you chip away at what I consider to be the cornerstone of affirmative action legislation, which is the admissions criteria in higher education, you now open the door to legitimately make arguments about the same criteria being used in federal and state contracts. So if you cannot use race as a criteria for admissions into higher education, then you can also in theory, make the case that requiring federal contracts to allocate a certain percentage based on race should also be considered illegal. So I need people to understand that it is not just, oh, we'll take our ball and go play in our yard. No, they're trying to make it where we not only don't have a ball, we don't have a yard. So
And let me
what
jump in and
I
say
think,
this. Let's add, I think this is real important. Oh, and I did mention this in the monologue. Don't think that this is just going to apply to, like AJ said, in terms of, getting federal contracts, state contracts for businesses, for entrepreneurs. This is for corporations. Like I said, they're sitting around saying, maybe we can finally get rid of this diversity, equity, and inclusion shit. We don't really need that. We don't need pay no person that we got to pay $100,000. And you know what? If we don't want to hire no black folks, it's okay because the Supreme Court, if they end affirmative action in college admissions, then why can't we end affirmative action in our hiring practices in corporate America?
and we've seen that with in the University of Texas system. I think it's Texas A&M has begun stripping their diversity, equity, and inclusion criteria. Of course, we know what's been happening in Florida, but I also think, Gino, what people need to understand that we are witnessing a perfect storm that is happening with regards to how this society, our country, is addressing race. Remember, we are not even a full year and a half out of a unprecedented global pandemic. While many of us were trying to figure out how to navigate these very tumultuous times, you had entities such as the one that brought cases that ultimately led to this Supreme Court decision working overtime to push to make sure this happens. And I would say that one of the actions that people really need to be paying attention to and taking up is paying attention to their local elections in this 2024 presidential cycle. I've long said it, I've said it on your show, and I will continue to say it, is that far too many people, and the media doesn't help this situation, tend to, gloss over the fact that in the presidential election cycle, we're also electing our members of Congress. Here in the state of South Carolina, also, next year we will not only vote for president, but we will vote for an entirely new General Assembly. South Carolina is not behind Florida. We are running neck and neck with Florida. In fact, if you look at a map of the United States and you pick from Virginia going over to Oklahoma and up to Idaho, all of those states have similar laws. They're running from the playbook. The only reason why a state like Florida gets the publicity that it does is because its governor is running for president.
Yes.
But I encourage people to go look at the docket of laws that has gotten passed in the last legislative cycle in each state. And what
Texas,
you will see,
Greg
right,
Abbott, yep.
and what you will see is these laws were being put in place and they actually are anticipating what happened today. So now, in addition to this Supreme Court decision, go look at what states will be filing bills at the state and local level that will mirror what you just talked about. We are already seeing censorship bans and curriculum bans and book bans regarding public education. Now, with this Supreme Court decision, it's not going to be a stretch for creative attorneys to come in and justify these actions by saying, look, the Supreme Court has said you can no longer use race as a criteria for acceptance into higher ed. So therefore, we don't need to use race as a criteria for DEI, diversity, equity, inclusions, or addressing the inequalities that we see in public education. But here's something else that I want people to understand, and this is specific to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has nine justices that are appointed for a lifetime, and those nine justices represent the final word when it comes down to legal matters in our country. And so it used to be a time where the expectation was that the Supreme Court would be the ultimate fair ruling on cases that started at a local level. Now we see that our Supreme Court is compromised with a 6-3 Republican supermajority. And it's not lost on people like me that the two black people on the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas, a black man, and Ketanji Brown Jackson, a black woman, are diametrically opposed on this issue. Clarence Thomas climbed the ladder of affirmative action to arrive where he is.
Please, that
And
part, because I was going there. Yes.
once he got there, he then not only kicked the ladder down, he set it on fire so that no one else would be able to
Yes.
climb up.
Yes, he did.
And
Thank you.
that is something that I think people need to understand. And that is that there are many people. Representation does matter, but it's the quality of the representation that we really need to look at because we've got black politicians who vote and act in the to the detriment of the black community. Byron Donalds in Florida, Tim Scott in South Carolina, and a host of others. And so what this ruling does now is it opens the door for a return to pre civil rights legislation, pre civil rights environment. And it gives groups like Moms for Liberty and the Heritage Foundation and others
And explain for those who,
ammunition.
AJ, do me a favor. For those who are watching who may not be familiar, break it down and explain to them exactly who these people, because you've been warning about this Moms
Sure,
for Liberty. So, yeah, like if we
sure.
walk into the barbershop or the hair salon, let's educate them and tell them exactly who these people are and what their agenda has been from the door.
Absolutely. So, Moms for Liberty, for folks who pay attention to what's been happening in public education, Moms for Liberty are those women and in some cases men that you see at local school board meetings and city council meetings arguing against masks, arguing against vaccines. Now, currently, they're arguing against diversity, equity, and inclusion, um, Black history, and Black culture being taught in public education.
Yep, banning
Um,
books.
they
Yeah.
Yes, they are, in short, the modern day version of the Daughters of Confederacy, but they are supported by billionaire conservatives and libertarians who have weaponized white angst at progressive movements and use that to drive a wedge in public education and gain a foothold politically. These groups are funded by groups like the Heritage Foundation. In fact, right now in Philadelphia, they are holding a conference um, where they are talking about their agenda. This conference is being attended by elected officials. Um, I know that Nikki Haley and Tim Scott, both of whom are presidential candidates, are rumored to be there, possibly even speaking, as well as state superintendents of education. So you know this Supreme Court decision is the topic of discussion there.
Yes.
But before we close, I want to give people some steps that they need to take
Thank you.
because this, while this issue is definitely hot right now, we know what happens in the media cycle is here today, gone tomorrow because we'll move on to the next thing. What I need people to understand is this is not going to stop. It's not going to end because they eradicated affirmative action. If you are a homeowner, if you are a potential homeowner, if you are a business owner, if you deal with government contracts, if you work in the space of cultural awareness, it's not just DEI. If you run youth programs that specifically target certain demographics like Black kids, LGBTQI plus, Native
Yes.
Indigenous kids, you really need to be paying attention to this, and you need to be getting in touch with your elected representation, because what happens is we restrict these actions to a higher level without recognizing that we have levels of power at our disposal. Your city council person, your county council person, your school board member, your state house rep, your U.S. congressional rep. All of these individuals need to hear from us. They need to hear from Black people. In fact, the only thing that we need to be doing in this upcoming election cycle as Black people is mobilizing and organizing to get as many of our people to the vote, to the poll. We need to create strong voting blocks. And you need to start evaluating your connections and your networks, both socially and professionally. Because another thing that we don't like to do is we don't like to call out those closest to us. If you have non-black associations, whether they be business or professional, start having these conversations. Because as we saw in the last presidential election, Donald Trump represented the dichotomy of America. 70 something million people voted for this man. You can't pay me to believe that those 70 something million people also don't have contact with marginalized groups like Black people. So we have to take a long, hard look in the mirror and ask ourselves, are we willing to face reality? Because this is a fight, and this is a fight that we must win. And so in 2024, I encourage Black people to ignore the background noise. I'm going to say this, and I know this may not be popular, Gino. I don't know how you feel about it, but we need to ignore the noise of people like Dr. Cornel West, who is running as a third
Hey,
party
I'm
candidate
with you.
for
Come
president.
on. You sound like
That
me. Come
does
on. You know.
nothing that does nothing for the Black community in this moment. We need to ignore those voices. And I will tell anybody, it's not that I'm a proponent of Joe Biden or the Democrats. I am looking at this from a realistic and practical standpoint. I want to know who's running for my local school board, who's sitting in all the elected offices that are oftentimes ignored by media pundits. That's where we need to put our energy, because those are the positions that we have the greatest access to. South Carolina, as a state, has 7 U.S. congressional representatives, and only one of them is a Democrat. One. And
Yes.
I need people to understand
And wait,
that
and then
we have.
let me jump in and help her out because I want to put that in context. It's like you said, seven
Mhm,
U.S. congressional districts, one
mhm,
black U.S. representative, Brother Clyburn, Mr. Clyburn,
mhm,
Representative Clyburn, has
mhm,
been there like for like a long time in a
mhm.
state with the African American population that is, if it is not
30%,
30,
almost 30%.
thank you, you go. That's where I was going. Thank
Right.
you.
And South Carolina is not unique in that. You can look at pretty much all the southern states,
Mississippi,
such as Mississippi, Alabama,
Georgia,
Louisiana.
yes.
And I would be remiss if I also don't point out that there have also been voter suppression cases being brought forth, because trust and believe, the same way Black folks are upset, white folks are preparing. So don't think it's just going to be an easy walk in the park, that we're going to sit here and try to do things to better ourselves that's not going to be met with resistance. So in closing, Gino, I want people to understand this is our fight. A lot of us got lulled into this false sense of security because we were taught that the civil rights movement got us to where we overcame. It has taken 50 plus years, but conservative white people are clawing back everything that our ancestors fought for. And it's not just going to be a means of us just doing for ourselves. Remember, Rosewood, Wilmington, Tulsa, Birmingham, Raleigh were all cities where black people were doing for ourselves. And
Chicago,
those cities,
the Red Summer of
Chicago,
1919.
all those cities that I just named also suffered from white mob violence. And now the violence shows up in our state houses, the same state houses that we don't put enough effort into making sure we have a voice in who gets up there. South Carolina has 124 members of the House of Representatives, 88 of them are Republican. And the number of them who have been elected with no opposition is criminal. So again, people can be mad, but just thinking that we're going to push our kids into HBCUs and just do for ourselves without a strategy that's feasible, not just to build our infrastructure, but protect that infrastructure, is very naive. So I'll stop there.
Uh, we got about 30 seconds. I'm going to just say this while I got you because you're repping part of the Divine Nine, the Black Greek organizations, your black fraternities and sororities. So when we make sure we send our kids back to our HBCUs, let's send some money. Let's send resources. Even if you didn't attend an HBCU, let's support so they can have endowment funds, which is really endowment fund is a fancy way of saying like money you got in the bank. So we can have the kind of
Mhm.
money for endowment funds at our HBCUs at Harvard and Yale and Princeton and Stanford and the University of Chicago have. Let's do that. And oh, by the way, real quick with the last 30 seconds that I got you on camera. So when they come to ask you to let your son or your daughter, your grandkids or your niece or nephew come and play basketball at Carolina or Clemson or University of Alabama or the University of Michigan or U.S. University of Southern California, say, nah, I think not. How about going to Howard or Morehouse or Spelman? Just wanted to put that on there. I knew I was running out of time. I want to shout out, thank you to AJ Davis. You can just search him on Instagram, on IG, on Facebook, on Twitter. Anjane Davis, AJ Davis, brilliant brother. Listen, I got a shout out. My number one fan, my CEO of publicity and promotion, my mother Mary Dixon. My baby sister is watching, Angela Jones. Her oldest son, my nephew, Kristen Jones, who you're gonna see in the Oval Office one day as the president of the United States. Who's a brilliant, brilliant young brother. So he didn't go to an HBCU. He stayed at home in Chicago and attended a university in Chicago, University of Illinois, Chicago. Brilliant. He didn't make it there because he was an affirmative action case. He was accepted because he is brilliant. So University of Illinois, Chicago was lucky to get Kristen Jones as now an alumni. They were lucky to get his brilliance and black excellence. So that was Harvard's loss, or the University of Chicago's loss, or Yale or Princeton or Stanford. So the greatness is inside of our children. There's greatness inside of every child. The problem is not the children. The problem is the adults and the environment around the children. So we have to remix that. We were great. There was greatness coming out of black people in the midst of slavery and Jim Crow, like I said earlier, with all the lynching and rape and murder. And we still produced people like George Washington Carver, Thurgood Marshall, Angela Davis. So, I mean, I'm not even going to try to name all the brilliant black men and women when oppression was at its highest. And now we got generations, our millennials and our Generation Z, our Gen Zers. They're like, we ain't going back. I know y'all trying to basically like erase the 19th and 20th century and somehow go back to the 18th century. It ain't happening. Our millennials are fearless. Our Gen Zers, damn sure, they ain't afraid of nothing. Nobody, almost to a fault. Sometimes you got to reel them in. It's like, hold on. They are fearless. They're the most educated, most intelligent, the most diverse, open-minded group in the history of our existence. And I get so excited talking about our young people, and you guys know it. So, but like I said, let's return back to our HBCUs. And for those who don't want to go to an HBCU, you have a right to go to a Harvard or Princeton. But understand, because the people there will look at you and say, well, how did you get in? They ended affirmative action. See, I got in because I'm great. How did you get in? Did your daddy pay to build a library? Did your daddy pay to build a new basketball arena? Or like in Brett Favre's case, did your daddy basically take money that was to go to welfare recipients and use it to build a volleyball arena? Or did you get it because your great-great-grandpappy went to this school? So we got to support our HBCUs, even if we didn't go there. Make sure they got the resources and the money. All these black billionaires, all these celebrities. So, when you get through making it rain, yeah, I ain't no shade on the strippers. Go on and you make it rain in the club. While you at it, make it rain, at Howard or Morehouse, Clark Atlanta University, Spelman, South Carolina State University, FAMU, all the HBCUs in Alabama and Texas and Florida and in Maryland and Ohio. I could go on and on and on. Support all these HBCUs. I'm just going to close. I'm going to remind you what my grandmother, Jean Jones, taught me as a little boy. She said, Jeannie, don't beg anybody to take your money, and never be anywhere or stay anywhere or never go anywhere where people don't want you. Thank you for letting me be a part of your life. As always, God bless each and every one of you and you and you and you and especially you, and God most of all, thank you for letting me do the Geno Jones Show. I come to you live Monday through Friday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. in Chicago, 3:30 p.m. out on the West Coast. Subscribe, share, screen grab this show, because this show, as you see and saw, was fire. Even all the shows are fire. Subscribe, share, screen grab, like, and binge watch all my back episodes. Send it to everybody, as my man Nelly would say, send it to everybody. The next live edition of the Geno Jones Show. It's going to be live on Friday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Keep in mind, we got the 4th of July holiday, and then I'm going to be taking time off. I usually take a little summer vacation, but I'll be keeping my eye and ears open. All right? I'm not going to miss anything. But remember, the Geno Jones Show is always available. Any back episode, 24/7, 365 days, and in a leap year like next year, 366 and a half days a year. Geno Jones Show right here on the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe, share the link, tell everybody to check it out. Shout out to Mr. Markel Bailey, the official barber and hairstylist for the Geno Jones Show. Check him out on Instagram, on IG. Kel be cutting up, KELBECUTTINUP, the CEO of Designer Cuts. Allie Jones. Allie Jones is the drip director, the official wardrobe consultant and stylist for the Geno Jones Show. Check her out and her collection, her new LX.NCL collection. She has a special crochet line of everything from swimsuits to tops to crochet leggings to these amazing handbags to beanies, little Scully. She made me a cap, a little beanie, and a whole lot more. It's incredible. Crocheted is awesome. And she's taking commission orders right now. LX, the LX N like Nanette, C like Charlie, LX.NCL underscore. That is her Instagram, her IG, and that is the name of her collection. And Bruce Gage, also a wardrobe consultant and stylist of the Geno Jones Show. The Mario Cuomo collection. This jacket that I'm wearing is part of the Mario Cuomo collection. Also, he's got the fly ball collection. You got to check it out. Miglio Di Mario Cuomo on Instagram, on IG. Miglio Di Mario Cuomo. It's an Italian name. So it's Migliodi Mario, Mario. Cuomo is actually spelled Uomo. All one word. We'll see you live Friday, 6:30 p.m. Mother, I love you. Baby girl, I love you. Chris, I love you. See you soon. And one day we'll see you 1600 Pennsylvania, and we'll be calling you Mr. President. Thanks for watching, everybody. 6:30 p.m. Friday. Until then, holla!
Subscribe and tune in to the next episode of The Geno Jones Show, exclusively right here on YouTube.